organization focused on getting 100% voter participation from the 2,000 students enrolled at Mount Holyoke. A couple of months ago, students from this group approached me and others with their strategies, and they asked me specifically to think about how to center the voices of those that historically had been marginalized. I was reminded of the freedom riders and freedom fighters I'd come to know so well during my many years working as a dean at a gender diverse women's college in Decatur, Georgia. While at that institution, I crossed paths with many leaders and closely collaborated with the Lowry Institute. A few months ago, I was able to talk to my friend, who I'm linked together in service with, Cheryl Lowry, about honoring her father's birthday on October 6th. We knew 2020 was a pivotal year, and this year in particular, we've lost so many of our civil rights giants, including Reverend C.T. Vivian and Congressman John Lewis. We wanted the 99th birthday of Reverend Dr. Joseph E. Lowry to be something special. And we discovered that Dr. Lowry's birthday was also shared by Fannie Lou Hamer, the great Mississippian who galvanized a nation, calling us for us to live up to our democratic ideals. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer once powerfully stated, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." And thus this became the moniker for tonight's event. Over this week, we've been engaged in many events, including a panel earlier today with freedom riders Joan Mulholland, Dave Dennis, and Joan Browning. It was truly a gift, and I know that tonight will be an additive to that wonderful gift we've had all day, as we work really hard with all of you to get out the vote, just as Dr. Lowry would have wanted us to do. I'd now like to welcome my friend and colleague, Cheryl Lowry, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Joseph and Everett Lowry Institute for Justice and Human Rights.
Thank you, Kiju. Thank you, Mount Holyoke. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Craig Newman Philanthropies. Thank you for collaborating to bring about this opportunity for us to honor not just my father, Dr. Lowry, but Congressman Lewis and C.T. Vivian and Fannie Lou Hamer, who shares his birthday, as you just said. This is a final event of our week-long service activities and what would have been Dr. Lowry's 99th birthday. It's been a good week, starting last Sunday with Sunday Supper, our millennial virtual civic engagement conversation, where our folk, Blake and Tyra, knocked it out of the park, getting millennials to get out the vote and phone banking. On Tuesday, we were able to serve local Atlanta University students with pantry bags through Mimi's Pantry, our campus pantry, which addresses food insecurity among college students. And then as Kijua just said, our Freedom Riders were so informative this morning. Thank you for all of the students who tuned in. Welcome to the students from Mount Holyoke, as well as students from the Atlanta University Center and others, as our Lowry Institute change agents and scholar activists who are serving across this country are tuning in as well. Many of them are phone banking, they're tutoring in inner city schools in Atlanta virtually. They're creating social justice research projects. I'm so proud of our students and students across the country who, in spite of, and perhaps I should say because of, the unrest in this country regarding the mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic, because of the murders and spotlight on systematic racism, students across the country have become more involved in the political process through nonviolent protest and by taking active roles in getting the vote out and making real change, and we're proud of you. Our efforts this week have focused on civic participation, just as my father has had us celebrate his birthdays in life. The focus tonight, voter suppression. Our students are going to introduce our guests shortly, but I certainly want to take a moment to thank them before we begin. A special welcome to both of our esteemed panelists. Melissa Perry Harris, my dad, and former board chair, Bishop Woody White, shout out to Bishop White, never missed your show. And they would end up talking about it afterwards, which I just found so interesting. We're happy to have you with us this evening. And of course, my mayor from the greatest city in the world, Atlanta. Thank you, Mayor Bottoms, for being with us today. As there is a national effort to attack our voting rights. Thank you for your voice and your strength as you've managed so much personally and on our behalf. And I have to also thank you for helping us honor my father as best we could under such unprecedented circumstances back in March. I will never forget your kindness. And so, Kijua, before I start crying, I think it's time for the students to come on and let's do it. Let's do this thing.
Thank you. We have 2 students that will be joining us this evening. Well, 3 total, sorry about that. But we're gonna play 2 important videos that we wanted to share. And just after that, myself and Kate Murray will be introducing our 2 speakers. So can we play the videos? Thank you.
I don't have to tell you how important it is to go out and vote. This is an opportunity to influence some major elections in our communities. For goodness sake, get up and vote.
We celebrated you in life, and we got you now, Dr. Lowry. We will vote every time in every election. To continue his legacy on what would have been his 99th birthday, I am standing with the Joseph and Evelyn Lowry Institute to remind you that voting is the first step to creating change in our communities. Happy heavenly birthday, Dr. Lowry. We got you, and we will vote.
Hello to the students, faculty, and staff of Mount Holyoke. I'd like to extend special appreciation to the student organizers of MHC Votes who are fighting for our democracy. I also want to recognize the hard work of students from several historically Black colleges and universities in my hometown, Atlanta. I have been privileged to work with the change agents of the Joseph and Evelyn Lowry Institute on Justice and Human Rights, which has dedicated students from Clark Atlanta University, Morehouse College, and my own alma mater, Spelman College. Young people who are committed to the fight for free and fair elections right here in Georgia. Elections are not events. They are the process by which we determine how our values will be lived and our laws will be made. But the first hurdle in participating in a democracy is understanding the challenges we face. You have spent the day immersed in the history, legacy, and continuing impacts of voter suppression. More importantly, you have been strategizing about how to secure voting rights for marginalized people. Few Americans understood the role of voter registration and the responsibility of voter engagement more than my beloved Dr. Joseph E. Lowry. When he passed away earlier this year, I lost a friend and a hero who never stopped fighting to shape the world in the image of justice. As we celebrate his birthday, we do so not by offering gifts or tributes, but by doing what I always saw him do to celebrate: demand the civil rights due to all of us and defend the voting rights that will make it so. Like Fannie Lou Hamer, also born on October 6th, Reverend Lowry believed in speaking truth to power and making power pay attention. We honor their birthdays and their life's work by continuing the battle of freedom. Here at Mount Holyoke and around the nation, with each protest and each vote, we move inexorably towards a future where equal justice under law is not just a phrase carved into marble buildings, but a belief carved into the hearts, minds, and souls of all Americans. I believe in our capacity to do as Dr. Lowry exhorted us, to become instruments of the people's will for justice, for fairness, for progress. So let's get it done.
It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Melissa Harris Perry. Professor Melissa Harris Perry is the Maya Angelou Presidential Chair at Wake Forest University in the Department of Politics and International Affairs and the Department of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. A dedicated scholar of politics, race, place, and gender, Professor Harris Perry is founder and president of the Anna Julia Cooper Center. Along with her husband, James Perry, she is principal of the Perry Partnership, offering both private and political consulting. From 2012 to 2016, she hosted the television show Melissa Harris Perry on weekend mornings on MSNBC and was awarded the Hillman Prize for Broadcast Journalism. She's penned columns for Essence and The Nation and served as editor-at-large for Elle.com, Zora, a media publication for women of color. She is an award-winning author and sought-after public speaker, lecturing widely throughout the United States and abroad. Dr. Harris Perry received her BA degree in English from Wake Forest University and her PhD degree in political science from Duke University. She also studied theology at Union Theological Seminary in New York. She has previously served on the faculty of the University of Chicago, Princeton University, and Tulane University. Professor Harris Perry has been awarded honorary degrees from many universities, including Meadville Lombard Theological School, Winston-Salem State University, Eckerd College, New York University, and Ithaca College. She and her family live in North Carolina. I'd now like to ask Kate Murray, class of 22 of Mount Holyoke, to speak.
It is my honor to introduce the 60th Mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. A daughter of Atlanta, Mayor Bottoms is committed to realizing her vision of One Atlanta, an affordable, resilient, and equitable Atlanta, which stands as a model city for both commerce and compassion. A lifelong public servant, Mayor Bottoms is the only mayor in Atlanta's history to have served in all three branches of government, serving as a judge and city council member before being sworn in as mayor. Leading with a progressive agenda focused on equity and affordable housing, Mayor Bottoms serves as chair of the Community Development and Housing Committee and the Census Task Force for the United States Conference of Mayors. Georgia Trends magazine named Mayor Bottoms as the 2020 Georgian of the Year. Among Mayor Bottoms' notable accomplishments to date include the establishment of the city's first fully staffed Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the appointment of an LGBTQ affairs coordinator and a human trafficking fellow, the citywide elimination of cash bail bond, the closure of the Atlanta City Detention Center to ICE detainees, and the rollout of the most far-reaching financial transparency platform in the city's history, Atlanta's Open Checkbook. In 2020, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law awarded Mayor Bottoms the Distinguished Civil Rights Advocate Award in recognition of her equity-driven leadership to help guide and protect marginalized communities. Under Mayor Bottoms' leadership, the City of Atlanta led the historically successful staging of Super Bowl 53, which included unprecedented community benefits, a $2.4 million renovation of the John F. Kennedy Park on Atlanta's west side, more than 20,000 trees planted throughout the community, and the seamless coordination of 40 federal, state, and local public safety agencies. A product of Atlanta Public Schools, Mayor Bottoms graduated from Frederick Douglass High School and received her undergraduate degree from Florida A&M University. She earned her Juris Doctorate from Georgia State University College of Law. An active member of the community, Mayor Bottoms is a member of the State Bar of Georgia, Jack and Jill of America, the Lynx Incorporated, and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She's also served on the board of Families First and shares her personal story of adoption and advocates on behalf of adoption and foster care. Mayor Bottoms is the daughter of Sylvia Robinson and R&B icon Major Lance. She resides in the historic Southwest Atlanta with her husband, Derek W. Bottoms, their 4 children, Lance, Langston, Lennox, and Lincoln, and their family dogs, Ace and Zeus.
Thank you so much, Kate, for that gracious introduction. I very much appreciate it. And thank you to all of you all, and to Cheryl, thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. It's hard to believe that when we last spoke back in March, we talked about Dr. Lowry's birthday in October, and we promised that we would be able to have the appropriate service in October, and who knew what life had in store for us, and that we would still be in this now normal. But that being said, I'm so very glad that we are still celebrating his life. He meant so much to so many of us, and I just thank you and your family for sharing him with us. And I'll just reflect on a moment as we talk about voting, what he meant to my election as mayor. I remember going to the house to sit with him, and he recorded a robocall for me. And we sent that call out, and if you know anything about robocalls, you can really gauge how people respond. You can tell when there's somebody who people don't like very much because they hang up very quickly. But you can also tell when people respect someone and they want to hear what they have to say. Dr. Lowry's robocall on behalf of my campaign was one of the most successful robocalls we had during the entire campaign. And I am forever grateful for that. And I know that we're going to engage in a very productive discussion, so I'll just keep my remarks brief. But I will just say that this election really is the most consequential election that I've faced in my lifetime, and certainly that many others have experienced. It was very interesting to me recently to have a conversation with my 18-year-old is we talked about the right to vote, and in only a way that my 18-year-old could prod me. So for the students who are listening, please don't do this to your parents. He asked me, did having the right to vote also mean that he had the right not to vote? And I said, absolutely not. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I even told him if that meant I had to request his absentee ballot and make sure that it was filled out appropriately, then that's what I would do. Dr. Lowry and so many others sacrificed so much to make sure that we have the right to vote and that we would exercise that right to vote. So we're almost there, 20 some odd days until this election is over. And I believe really righting all of the wrongs that we've experienced over the last few years in America, the healing will begin. But I remain grateful to Dr. Lowry and to his lovely wife, Evelyn, for all that they've done to allow us to be together today. So thank you.
Mayor, thank you so much. I can see Ms. Lowry up there and the smile on her face. I don't know if all of our participants can see or not, but obviously the agony of having lost your father at the very beginning stages of this pandemic, when, you know, now we got people having parties for just anything, and knowing that there hadn't been that opportunity to say goodbye and to do the homegoing in the way that would normally have been befitting. And so I too, like the mayor, feel very grateful to be included in this moment in a continuation of an honoring of your father that will not end tonight or next year or at any point, because as the mayor just gave us on some full Black Mama situation there, you will, right, continue to honor the work that has gone before by being the citizen that you must be now. So, Mayor, since you are in this moment prepared to tell us how you are even parenting around these questions, I just have to ask, did you watch the debate?
Well, I am ashamed to say I actually fell asleep, but I expected that I would do that because once I settle in the bed, it's a wrap. But I did tape it, and I was able to watch the repeat of the debate. So I didn't make it through live all the way, but I did watch it again.
So you missed the 2-minute fly situation, because and everything that happened afterward was so, it was a little bit like I mean, it's always been true for Black folk, right? That an election is high stakes. There's never been any election for us that has not been high stakes. But it's also been true that we've been able to find some humor and some humanity. And that has felt so absent this time. And we found humor, I think, with Vice President Pence and the fly last night, but we found a lot of humanity with Senator Harris. Talk to me about, when you did rewatch it, your experience of watching Senator Harris. I saw many Black women talking about that tightrope that she was walking, of needing to be forceful, needing to be clear, needing to be heard, but also having to thread a needle so that she doesn't come off to everyone watching as the angry Black woman.
Yeah, and I thought she was masterful at managing it all, and I felt it. I felt every piece of it, and I even found myself at some point cringing, like, don't go too far, don't go too far. And I think that really speaks to what we have to juggle. And not that her going too far would be inappropriate, but I was projecting as to what her going too far would mean today as we talked about it. But that being said, she did a great job. And it really was an opportunity to highlight the many facets of who she is. She's compassionate. And also she's brilliant, and to take on Mike Pence and to see that fly not move, and the memes have given me so much laughter today. That flag would not be moved.
It would not. So as though we are all just having to bear witness to the object lesson that it is when a Black woman stands in public space and then has the nerve to actually speak in public space, despite having threaded that needle, despite having worked to be her forceful, brilliant self, but also to pull back when necessary. Today, she was roundly and repeatedly attacked by the President of the United States. And again, not so much for her actual policy views or perspectives, which might have been tough, but that's politics, but instead was called a monster and a communist, and not in a good way, right, by the President of the United States. I wondered in that moment how discouraging that was for the future mayors of Atlanta, for the future mayors of Charlotte, for the future mayors of Chicago, for all the little Black girls who want to someday lead, to see that no matter who you are and how you have carried yourself, that you can be called a monster the next day.
Well, and almost on cue, my 10-year-old daughter has walked up to the doors as if she heard your words. I did CNN just before I joined you all, and what I said, and there oftentimes I wish that I could be more eloquent. But simply put, he is a silly man with silly words. And I ended the interview and I was sharing this with you all backstage. My mother called to tap my hand. I said, this is what we get from him 1 week removed from his deathbed, and God help us all. My point being, usually when someone has experienced a miraculous healing, and they've overcome something, we get the best of them. But instead, we continue to get all that this man is. And that is, he is a vile man who doesn't respect women. And something I thought about that my mother often says to me is when someone doesn't care about their own life, they won't care about yours. He doesn't care anything about his life, as evidenced by the last week and how he's treated his own health. But on top of that, he doesn't care anything about respecting women. And he's shown us that over and over and over again. This is a sitting United States senator. And when you look at what Governor Whitmer is dealing with out of Michigan, this comes from his hatred and his calling upon people to be disrespectful to women, even calling upon people as it relates to Governor Whitmer in so many words, wink, wink, nod, nod, to take someone's life. This is the President of the United States.
And I want to just clarify for anyone who's watching who maybe hasn't had CNN or NPR, streaming all day, that the mayor is talking about a specific event that occurred today where the FBI apparently foiled a plot by the Michigan militia to kidnap the governor of Michigan, who, as you will know, is a woman governor, who has received a great deal of criticism for her decisions around the COVID crisis and trying to make decisions in line with the best science that we have for dealing with the public health crisis of this pandemic. And so for those of you, again, who remember from the first presidential debate, that when asked about the Proud Boys, the president said, not that he condemned them, but rather to step back and stand by. And then here we have an American militia group attempting to overthrow the government through the kidnapping and presumed attempted violence of a sitting governor. Just to because I know not everyone is on top of every part of the news. So Mayor, I was going to move us towards talking about voting, but before we do that, just because in part of the, I think, really important point that you brought up about the ways that our brushes with illness, with mortality, with the very sort of stuff of our humanity usually creates a little bit of softness, empathy, openness, and that we have not seen that from this president. But you too are a survivor of a COVID-19 infection, and your husband was more ill than you. And I'm wondering what lessons you took from that experience and how it has impacted the way that you've governed in the midst of this crisis.
Just really, Melissa, just again, this reminder of how fragile life is. 3 people in our household, one was very, very, very sick. That was my husband. But even as I sit here, the entire left side of my face, you may not be able to see it, it's swollen. I woke up one day post-COVID with a face that looked like a pumpkin. And I can't figure out, the doctors can't figure out why the left side of my face is still swollen. So this is such a serious disease. And it just reminds you how quickly things have changed. Now, by the grace of God, we're doing fine. As my husband says, people die.
Yeah.
But he wakes up every day with a migraine headache. He has bouts of inexplicable fatigue that just hits him suddenly. And, especially for our young people listening, this is why it's so important that we take all precautions, because you can take it home to people who are a bit older and may not be able to fight it off in the same way that young people can. But it's just this reminder of how fragile life is and how things can change, and how for as much as we think that we control, we really don't control a whole lot. But as it relates to how I govern, I was always committed to making sure that I could sleep at night, meaning nobody was expecting a pandemic. Mayors aren't prepared to deal with pandemics, but I knew that I wanted to be able to say I made every decision that I could make and did all that I could do to make sure that I didn't cost anyone their life.
So again, I'm going to go just a little bit further down this road, and then we'll come back to voting, in part because this is kind of like the consequences of voting, and then we'll go back to why we need to vote. But in the accident of history, it turns out that many of the cities that are hard hit by this are in fact governed by Black women mayors now. So, Mayor, you in Atlanta, we have a sister mayor in what is actually the greatest city in the country, which is New Orleans. But I'll troll you on that a little later when we talk about that Falcons record, 0-4. But we have a sister mayor in New Orleans, London Breed in San Francisco. We have a sister mayor in Chicago, and not in every one of these cases, but particularly in your case, here you are as the mayor of the major metropolitan, trying to make decisions, and you are, rather than being supported by your governor, you are having to battle your governor to protect people who are presumably also his people. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that experience means for your understanding of how important it is to have representation, to have people trying to protect us?
So it's funny, I just talked to Mark Morial yesterday, former mayor of New Orleans, and we just had this conversation. I said, I thought being mayor was supposed to be a little fun. I said, and I'm just trying to do a gut check here. Is it me, or is it 2020? And he said, no, it's bad. Yeah. He said, and it's doubly bad when you're battling your governor and you're having to do battle with the White House. And that's what we're facing across this country. And it is, none of us were expecting a pandemic, period. But the notion that people can disregard science and that these are people who are elected to represent us and work in our best interests is just really mind-boggling to me. But I'm so grateful for the network of sister mayors, and the great thing, we have a diverse coalition of sister mayors, and even our brother mayors. We're constantly texting. In fact, everyone whom you mentioned and a few others, I'm on a text thread with. I was on them today. We had some laughs about the fly. and talked about some other stuff too, but it's almost like a group therapy session because everybody's feeling it. Because being a mayor, I mean, we all, you know, people have hard jobs, not just being a mayor, people who have much more difficult circumstances. But dealing with this president and having to deal with our governor over the past few months, it's been like pushing a boulder up a hill with one hand tied behind their back and one leg, you know, hooked to a wheelbarrow. It's been hard.
Yeah, and I, you know, again, to go to our young people, well, actually really to everyone, we can just remember that if all the votes had been counted and if some different kinds of processes for our votes had been in place, then the mayor would have been dealing with Governor Abrams, not with Governor Kemp. And the difference that would have made is not slight or small. I just want to show for folks, just so that we're very clear about what these numbers are. So I'm going to kill the media services guy here because I'm about to ask him to show the slides that are at the end instead of at the beginning. But I pulled a couple of numbers. So this is slide number 9 and slide number 10 in that slide deck that I sent, just so that everyone is very clear about how disparate the impact is. Nope, go down, 9. We're going to COVID. Nope, see.
The slides are going.
I know, we gotta go down to 9. We'll go down a little bit further. We're going to the COVID slides. They're kind of like one's red and one's blue, and they're sideways like this. Sorry, but if you
I've got to plug in here. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, there we go. There we go. So if we just take a look here, you'll see, and again, this will just take a minute. I just want folks to see how disparate the impact of COVID-19 is in Black communities. So remember, Black Americans are 12% or so of the American population, but in terms of cases, African Americans make up about 18%, Hispanics make up almost 29% of the cases, whereas white non-Hispanic Americans make up 44% of the cases. And then if you pop down to the next slide, that's got the blue lines on it, perfect, thank you. You'll see there, and these are the mortality rates. So again, African Americans are about 12% of the American population, but make up almost 21% of the deaths from COVID-19. So we can pop out of the slides now, but I just wanted us to be sure that we actually understood how disparate this impact was.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I'll just go back to the elections. You talked about there could have been a Governor Abrams. Even going back to our election that I mentioned earlier, out of almost 97,000 votes cast, 832 votes made the difference. So every single vote really does matter, and it should count, and it can make all of the difference in terms of the course of our future in our communities. And when you look at those slides, we are where we are because of the Trump administration. The H1N1 flu came up last night, and to hear Vice President Pence talk about what could have been under those circumstances, but 60 million people didn't die with H1N1 because it was managed differently. And I would venture to say, and I wrote this down earlier today, I think the projection now is if over the next 100 days, people would wear masks, 100,000 lives could be saved. And I would love to see the breakdown, how many of those lives would be in our Black and brown communities.
I want to pivot to exactly this point that you're making, that not only that the elections have consequences, that they matter, that they are meaningful, who is governing, who is making these decisions, but part of what those folks have recently also been doing is making decisions about who then gets to vote next. So it's not just that voters are choosing their representatives. These days, representatives are also choosing their voters. And not just now, but through much of the history of the American story, we've had to overcome extraordinary barriers. So last night, Senator Harris sort of towards the end was making an appeal towards everyone please vote. And of course, I want everyone to vote. But I also want to acknowledge that once again, we are all going to be voting under the circumstances of not having the full protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So here we sit 100 years after the 19th Amendment, but we may in fact have a situation where many people of color, where many students are shut out from voting. And so I thought I would just sort of give that to you and say, especially with what happened in Georgia recently, in the primaries, how are you feeling about sort of the health of our right to vote?
I don't feel great about it, because we know that there are so many ways in which voter suppression is formed. So in Georgia, during our primary in June, the way that it took form, it was in every way possible. It was people showing up to their polling places, like my cousin, who's voted at the same place for the past 30 years or so, who'd been told that his name was no longer on the voting roll because he was a convicted felon. Well, he's not a convicted felon. So it happened that way. And then it happened with people with our precincts being removed and people standing in line to early vote until 2 a.m. in the morning. It happened that way. And then it happens in that votes aren't counted. I had requested an absentee ballot. I never received an absentee ballot. Thankfully, I had an opportunity to show up in person and vote. So I don't feel good about where we are with voting, but it doesn't mean that we don't still show up and we don't still try. Because that's what this is all about. It's about making people quit. It's about making people get so frustrated that they give up and they don't care about voting and they don't want to be bothered with it. I was at one of our polling precincts last year, I believe, year before last, there were some challenges there. And to see a man show up in his uniform from work to stand in line to vote and then get frustrated because he had to get back to work and just turn around and walk out the door, it breaks my heart. And that is not what our democracy is supposed to be about.
I so appreciate that, because I do think so much of the voter suppression is really just about setting those hurdles, right, and frustrating folks. It does feel like the other piece of it, at least this year, is potentially very real acts of intimidation. So when we hear the president in the last debate openly calling for his supporters to, he said, simply to observe at the polls. But again, in conjunction with the comments that he made about the Proud Boys, it led, I certainly had an immediate sense of, oh, that feels to me, right? That sounds to me like the kinds of voter intimidation that Black folks, especially in the South, encountered for the entire period of Jim Crow. And I'm wondering if in Atlanta or in Georgia or in any of the networks in which you're engaging, people are talking, leaders, political leaders may be talking about how to protect poll workers, how to protect voters, so that no matter whom they're coming to vote for, Democrat or Republican, people can cast their ballot without intimidation.
So what we've done in Atlanta, although as a city, as an organization, as a city, we are not responsible for our polling precincts. Our county has that responsibility, and certainly our Secretary of State. We still know that it's our responsibility to do whatever we need to do to make sure that people can exercise their right to vote. So I just signed 2 executive orders as mayor. One gives our employees 4 hours off of work between early voting and election day to actually go and cast their vote. But the other one, we're giving 8 hours of paid leave for our city employees who wish to go and volunteer in their communities at their polling precincts. And that's so important. Again, if you've ever shown up in a polling place, you know that quite often it's older, senior citizens who often work at the precincts. They love the jobs. They've been doing them for so many years, but with COVID, being in those places puts them at increased risk. So we're gonna have some volunteers in our communities doing what we can do to make sure that people are protected as they show up to vote, that they aren't intimidated. when they show up to vote. And we're just asking people, and I'm just encouraging people, early vote early if you can. Don't wait until the last minute.
So I want to show folks, in case they think that we're just talking about how powerful the vote can be, I just want to show a few more slides, to just demonstrate just how powerful, not just the vote in general, but quite specifically Black women's vote can be. So if we pop back up media services, I'm so sorry. So it's, we can just start with the very first one, so I'll do the first two quickly. So remember, the vote is always two different things. Sometimes we talk about it as though it's one, but everyone who has the right to vote has two choices. First, it's turnout. We call that 0-1. Am I going to vote or am I not going to vote? And then the second is, once you've decided you're going to vote, who are you going to vote for, A or B? And sometimes, right, in media, you'll hear people talk about it as though it's only about the A or B. Am I going to choose President Trump or am I going to choose Vice President Biden? But in many ways, the most crucial question is actually 0-1. Not everyone makes the decision to vote. But the more that Black women vote, for example, the bigger differences we'll see. So if we just go down to the next slide, and then down one more, there we go. So let me just show you a quick story. It's one of my favorite graphs, and I'm sure the mayor has probably seen it before. So in 2004, I just want you to, so that pink line kind of track that kind of, maybe salmon colored line there, that's African-American women voters. And I want you to see that Black women voters basically outperform all the time. So in 2004, when, for goodness sake, it's John Kerry running for president, it's not as though there's some like great symbolic measure going on, right, relative to Black women. Black women are still voting at rates much higher than would be expected, given all of the other challenges that Black women face in terms of socioeconomic status, education, income, all of that. And instead, Black women are voting at almost the same rates as white men, right, who overall have much more income, education, and all of that. But then look at what happens in 2008 and in 2012. Look at where Black women's voting goes. It goes up to something closer to 75%, basically 3 in 4 African-American women voting, both to elect President Obama and then to re-elect President Obama. And what I want you to know about that number is that that kind of voter turnout is only seen in countries where it is mandatory to vote. So basically, Black women were voting in 2008 and 2012 as though it were illegal not to go vote for primarily Michelle's husband. All right, down one more. I just want you to see what then happens in 2016. If we go to the next slide. So a couple of things happened in 2016. Now this is data from the Pew Research Center. And so this is their topper, right? Their title is Black Voter Turnout Declines. But actually Black voter turnout just returned to normal, to what it had been. And in fact, actually was a little elevated over what it had been in 2004 and previously. But a kind of stunning thing happens here, which is to say not only that white vote went up, but particularly the white male vote went up quite sharply in 2016, at the same time that Black folks, and particularly Black women voting, returned to historic norms. So we can come out of the slides now. But I just want you to see those, because what I want you to see is that when Black women turned out, and I want to be clear, at levels only seen in countries where it is mandatory. But when we were so motivated, so determined, so certain to make it happen, that in that case, there was the election of President Obama, not only once, but twice. And so that is the difference that can happen.
Yeah, we matter. We matter, we matter, we matter. And you think about, and I look at my kids age and range from 18 to my twins are 10. My twins know who President Obama is, but they don't remember him being president. So their experience with the leader of our country is the man who lives in the White House now. And even last night, my 10-year-old son, who really pays attention to politics, he's all into it. I asked him would he watch the debate with me, and he said, why would I just want to watch people arguing and fussing at each other? He said, I could be doing homework, I could be working, I don't know what work he was going to do, studying. But what it really said to me is our kids are watching, and what they're taking away is not something positive.
So I'll ask one more, and then I'm going to do a couple of quick speed rounds, and then I'm going to turn it over to our viewers. So, so folks who are in with us right now, please feel free to populate that Q&A, or if you're watching on another medium and you want to send some questions, the mayor and I would be happy to engage. So feel free to please put in some questions in the Q&A for the mayor. So often when I talk to young people, they'll say, all right, you can show me a graph, you can show me who was president, who might be president, but what difference does that make to me? Even when President Obama was president, we saw young black men being, young unarmed black men being killed by police. We saw young unarmed black women being killed by the police. And then under Trump right now, we're seeing obviously the killing of George Floyd, and then a complete lack of justice in the case of Breonna Taylor. So if what I want to do is make a difference in the extent to which Black lives actually matter, and the extent to which Black people can live and be free in this nation, what difference does voting make?
It makes all the difference. It doesn't mean that our leadership is perfect. It doesn't mean that our country is perfect, but it means that Dr. Lowry and Evelyn Lowry and so many others made a sacrifice and did all that they did so that we could have a part in this. And this is an imperfect union. But when you have someone in the highest office of our land who spews hate, when you have someone at the local level who spews hate, it sows division, and that division grows and it festers. And so you're absolutely right. We had our fair share of problems under the Obama administration. We've had our fair share of problems in this country for over 400 years. But what I know is at least over those 8 years, I knew that there was somebody who cared and somebody who was at least trying to make a difference. And that's why our votes matter. We now have someone who incites violence, who has no respect or regard for women, no respect or regard for people of color, for religious diversity. He doesn't respect anything or anybody. And it's not just about this guy in the White House. It's about local elections. It's about statewide elections. I was sued by our governor because I wanted to require people to wear masks in our city in the middle of a pandemic. He sued me personally. So again, if you think about Georgia, a few thousand more people had shown up to vote. They were on the voter rolls, and you gave us the graph, 1, 2. They just decided to sit it out. And this is where we are in this state, and this is where we are in the country. And thank God it worked out for me in Atlanta, but this is where we could have been in Atlanta as well. The woman who I ran against for mayor of Atlanta just a couple of years ago was a staunch Trump supporter. Atlanta.
So I want to, so because of where you've taken us, and I see a couple of the questions in the Q&A that I can actually respond to before we go to our speed round, because I really want your speed round questions too. So I want folks keep putting your questions in the Q&A, but I can actually answer. We have one question asking about, do I have any data around Black women's turnout in 2018? And then another question, or actually from the same person, will the presentation be available? So we are taping this webinar right now, and it will it's going to go live on a couple of different websites. The Lowry Institute will stream it, and it will live in their archives, and then my center, the Anna Julia Cooper Center, will also stream this across Facebook, and it will live in our archives as well. So you'll be able to see aspects of this. But let me share for media services, if you'll go to the next 2 slides, I just want to share to answer our question here, in part about 2018, but also just a little bit more about the AB part. So this is Perfect. So let's just stop at 2016 for a second. And, you know, y'all were so, and I say y'all, just meaning African-American women voters, we were tough on white women voters in 2016, because if you look at that graph, kind of look at those red boxes over there, you'll see that if you look at white male voters, they are overwhelmingly supported candidate Trump, now President Trump, and you'll see that white women voters gave about 52% of their vote to President Trump. And there was a fair bit of angst. You'll see it in that picture there from the 2017 Women's March. But I just want you all to remember that actually white women always tend to vote in about a 50-50 split, right? Unlike Black women who vote kind of more fully towards one party, and that actually white women had voted more like 55% for candidate Romney, and so actually had sort of gone more Democratic. But here's what I want you to really take a look at here. Look down at those blue boxes. See, Black women are at 93% for Clinton, but don't miss that first blue box, which is African American men, who voted at 80% for Secretary Clinton, but at 13% for President, then candidate, now President Trump. So it was a significant increase among African-American male voters towards President Trump. And then if you go to the very next slide, and then I'll stop here, the very next slide is actually that gubernatorial race between Abrams and Kemp. And again, you'll see an overwhelming percentage of white men and white women voters supporting Mr. Kemp in that gubernatorial race. And you'll see Black women, almost every single one, right? 97% voting for Abrams. But again, 88% of African-American men, with 11% giving their vote to Mr. Kemp. So we can go ahead and back out of the slides now. So here's what we know for sure about 2018. Young Black folks' votes were outrageous. They were amazing. You had to go back to 1914 to find a midterm where young people, so 18 to 25, voted at the same level of enthusiasm, right, as they did in 2018. So we know 2018 was huge. But we also know that while President Obama drew 92 and 93% of Black men's votes, we haven't quite seen that same level of support for some of our Black women candidates, or for even white women candidates. So the big question is, come 2020, will Black men give their vote to the Biden-Harris ticket? And I want to be clear, the vast majority of Black men still did, but it is still a somewhat different percentage, and it's worth asking questions to understand that vote a little bit. Now, I have a couple questions that I just want to ask you because I've got you here, Mayor. What are you reading these days?
It has taken me so long to finish a book. And I'm reading a book that should have taken me 2 days to read, but I'm reading Instinct by T.D. Jakes.
Yes. Love that. Okay, do you have a guilty pleasure, like a favorite Netflix or a favorite food?
Right now, it's really interesting with quarantine. I picked up watching television sometimes because I don't ever get to really watch TV. But I'm watching The Crown. I'm watching Lovecraft Country and The Real Housewives of Potomac.
Not of Atlanta?
Well, they'll be on in a couple of weeks.
All right, who is your best friend?
My mom.
Oh, I love that. You have a very special path to parenting, but what is the most surprising lesson you have learned as a parent?
Just how different kids come into the world, that they come with personalities that for as much as you think you influence them, that they really are, I would say maybe 80 to 90% set, just in terms of their demeanor. And at least with my four, their personalities haven't changed a whole lot. They have the same personalities that they had as babies, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not.
I like to say, before you're a parent, you're a sociologist. You think, oh, I can shape this, and after you're a parent, you're like a geneticist. Oh, they just showed up like this. I didn't do this.
Yeah, and I was very judgmental before I was a parent. I would often tell my sister all the things she was doing wrong and what she should do and what I was going to do when I became a parent, none of which pass.
Oh, I know that story. All right, so since we're talking to college students, do you have a class or a teacher from college that had an impact on you that you most remember?
Oh gosh, I have quite a few, but Professor Roosevelt Wilson, who was my journalism teacher at FAMU, and we used to have to take a current events test, and you had to read the paper from beginning to end, and the questions would be anywhere in between, and the class was at 8 a.m. And I thought that I could somehow smart my way around reading the paper every day. Mm-hmm. And so needless to say, I failed the first several tests, and he called me into his office and he said, and finally at some point I realized I had to stop staying out so late or get up early, and I had to read the paper. And he said, I would give you an A because I think you learned the lesson, but I'm concerned that if I give you this A, you'll miss the lesson. Mm-hmm. And that semester, which was probably the only semester it happened, I had straight A's in every class except his, and I took the B. And it's just this lesson that I've always taken with me, and I said, give me the B. And one, he cared enough to have that conversation with me, but also that has just always been my reminder not to ever expect that anything's going to be given to me and there's a shortcut to excellence.
Oh, I love that. That is my kind of teacher. All right, let's say you were given an opportunity to throw a dinner party for 4. COVID is over magically. The magic, the COVID fairy has come and taken away. So this is going to be in person, 4 people, and they can be living or deceased, historic or more contemporary. What 4 people, who would you invite to dinner?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to leave out anyone living because I'm going to believe that one day I'll have dinner with somebody extraordinary living. But my aunt Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, she was an early part of SNCC, the only woman to serve as executive secretary of SNCC with Congressman Lewis. She died before I was born. She died at 26. Mm-hmm. And he would tear up every time he talked about her. So she would be one. Dr. Lowry, of course, that would only be fitting to include him. And then Dr. King, mm-hmm. because of the impact that he's had on all of our lives. And the last one, this is a tough one. I would say Maya Angelou.
I appreciate that. She was extraordinary. I would do almost anything to have one more meal with Dr. Angelou. All right, my very last question that I'm opening up to the students. If you are offered a position in a Biden-Harris cabinet, will you take it?
You know what? I don't know. I can honestly say I don't know. This is something that I'm praying about. One, I'm praying that they win. But I've got a lot of work to finish in Atlanta, and I have another year left on my term. So, you know, I'm praying in the same way that God was very clear to me when I should run for mayor, that he'll be very clear to me on what my future is. But right now, I'm just going to keep doing the job. It's a hard one, but it's the job I love.
Well, I'm glad to know that we have your prayer request on the table, because I got some prayer warriors I know, and so we'll just get the sister circle on that. So I want to ask Media Services to go ahead and unmute our 2 fabulous students, and I will sit back and I will turn it over to the 2 of you.
And actually, we're going to welcome Lily James, class of 2021, and Alicia Sawyer, who is a Spelman College first year, class of 2024. Lily James is a Mount Holyoke student with MHC votes. So we'll let the 2 of you ask your questions. Thank you. We'll start with Alicia.
Hello, and thank you, Mayor Keisha Bottoms, as well as Dr. Melissa Harris-Perry. Thank you for speaking and having this dialogue with us tonight. It has been truly amazing to see. I have a question actually for both of you in regards to, I really enjoyed the data you presented, Dr. Harris-Perry, about Black women votes, and that's so important. What is your take and your prediction of the African-American women vote for this upcoming term, and especially since there's so many female mayors and as well as Attorney Kamala Harris is clearly visible on the political scene, and what factors do you see, both good and bad, to also affect those votes coming in from African-American women?
I have lots of thoughts. You want to take that one first though, Mayor? Do you have some ideas around that?
Mine will be very simple. I think we're going to show up in record numbers. We're going to show up and we're going to show out. And I think this year we're going to bring a lot of folk with us to the polls. I already see all of the networks, the social networks working, and the wheels turning. So I think it's going to be an extraordinary year for us.
So I probably mostly agree with that. I'll say, look, I was in this terrible situation when the short list that Vice President Biden was considering emerged, because on that list included this person who's an AKA and this other person who is a mayor of Atlanta. And I am a Delta from New Orleans. So I either got my sorority sister, but from Atlanta, God help us, or I got this wonderful, woman from California, but she's an ACA. So I'm only kind of half joking, but I will say that the AKAs, especially the Jamaican AKAs, were all the way out of order in the best way in social media. And so, obviously as a student at an HBCU and surrounded by the culture and life of HBCUs, although I did not attend one myself, taught at North Carolina Central, have a degree at Winston State, and I'm connected there. And then all my brothers and sisters before me went to Howard. And so there is a way that I see, although Senator Harris is not at the top of the ticket, I do think she inspires some of that similar kinds of feelings that 2008 and 2012 inspired around history and around the sense of putting someone who has some real cultural connection. So I just want to be clear, it's not that I just think Black folks vote for Black folks because they're Black, because, no, but because I think there is some meaningful connection historically and culturally. Now, let me also say, there's also real questions about Senator Harris's record as a prosecutor. And again, I think Mayor Lance Bottoms can relate to this as herself a former prosecutor, that there is often that you have to prove yourself to African-American communities and voters that your role and record as a prosecutor means that you have a deep understanding of the criminal justice system, one that will lead to greater justice, rather than that you are reflexively on the side, right, of the prosecutorial side. And so I think that when people have the opportunity to do that, like the mayor has done, then you can win that. So the last thing I'll say is I think we're going to show up. I think we're going to show out. I also think that there's going to be enormous and extraordinary efforts to suppress that vote, to not count that vote, to lose that vote, to purge that vote. And so we are genuinely in the position that we take right now from John Lewis and from Reverend Lowry and from C.T. Vivian. We are going to have to genuinely, and not just metaphorically, risk our lives to vote. And man, that is tough, and it makes me very sad, because I don't want us to have to in 2020 risk our lives to vote, but we are going to have to.
And I'll add this to what Dr. Harris-Perry has said. I am a bit concerned about Black men. Only because I see the effort that's being put towards getting them to stay home. And I'm seeing it with my 18-year-old. So there are a number of times when I'm talking to him and I'm going, are these QAnon talking points? But they are being sent to him in messages and in ways that appeal to an African-American Morehouse student. So he doesn't recognize it as trickery. It comes to him in a way that that will discourage him. He will not vote for Trump, but I'm just concerned that he won't be encouraged to vote at all. And it's being confirmed as I'm talking with other Black men. I received a text earlier today from someone who works on our west side, where the AU Center is, very involved with ex-felons and giving people a second chance and very community oriented. He told me that Trump reached out to him directly. And that's what concerns me. And what I shared with him is, he doesn't mean us any good. He may be reaching out to you directly, but it's not because he means our community well. It's simply because he wants to suppress our vote.
I would agree wholeheartedly. But great question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for answering, you both. Thank you again.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lily James. I use she, her pronouns. As Kajua mentioned, I'm a senior at Mount Holyoke, and I also have the absolute joy and honor to be one of the co-directors of the MHC Votes Task Force, working to get to 100% voter participation this election. So I'm here representing, the 20 plus incredible students who are working tirelessly on this right now. And so I think my question to you both is, we're doing everything we can as students right now to make voting more accessible for all students on our campus, but we constantly feel like we are facing huge structural barriers and fighting uphill battles. So beyond just working on our individual campus to fight the voter suppression we face as students by turning out the student vote every year, what can we be doing on a more structural level to fight student voter suppression all across the country?
That's another great question. What I would say is, what we've been encouraging people to do is to register in such numbers and to show up and vote in such high numbers that even when votes are suppressed, because they will be suppressed, there won't be margin for error. Because you look at 2016 and you look at the 10,000 vote difference, I believe, in Michigan and 15,000 in Wisconsin. I may have it reversed, but they were very thin margins, and all you have to do is suppress a few votes here and there in a few precincts across these states, and then you end up with 10,000 votes. So what we're saying, just you can't let the margins be thin. You gotta register and over-register. So if your goal is 100, make your goal 200. If your goal is 200, to get 200 people to show up, then really make it 300. We gotta push it over the edge.
Really, and I love your question, because we're always, in the context of politics, we're always playing short, medium, and long-term games, right? And it's exhausting. And so you kind of want to take a nap after doing some of the short term, but I really appreciate that you're also thinking through those long-term questions. So yes, I mean, right now it's like the shortest short term, right, of getting people registered and turned out. And so then here are some medium and long-term goals. So one is to really think about expanding the realm of what's possible by, instead of just always trying to hold ground, actually trying to push. So for example, there's really no reason we couldn't expand the right to vote at the level of, for example, school board to 16-year-olds. So, and people are like, what, 16? Yes, 16. Not saying for all offices, but given the direct concern of the school board, yes, I absolutely think if we started to think about 16-year-olds being enfranchised. So here's part of why we want to do that. Because if you enfranchise a 16-year-old to vote, then by the time they're 18, they're in the practice of voting. They're in the practice of being contacted. They're in those roles. So one is start thinking about ways we could actually expand the vote. And that's going to happen state by state. That's not going to happen federally. But where are there little pockets and places where we can start to make that happen? And the second thing I would say is, gosh, look at how much work it takes just to exercise the franchise. We exist in a country that has always been quite nervous about the possibility of the people ruling and governing, and the more the people get brown and the more the people get young, the less likely we are to want them to vote. So it's time for us to pass the John Lewis Act. So right now there simply is no federal right to vote. And I'm going to say that again because it's the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And if you go read the 19th Amendment, it says no state shall abridge the right to vote based on gender. But that is what states will do, and it's about what they can't do, right? They can't abridge. But there is no affirmative right to vote in the Constitution. So we got to pass the John Lewis Act in order to protect the rights that we have now, and then let's get us a constitutional amendment that affirmatively asserts the right to vote for all people 18 and over, all persons regardless of gender or race, former servitude, current incarceral status. Let's go ahead and enshrine it constitutionally. And if that sounds like totally crazy and that could never happen, think of all the totally crazy things that have happened that they said could never happen on the right and on the left. So that'd be my suggestion. Keep pushing all those boundaries. We have I think we have one more question here, and I think we have just like 50 seconds to get to it, but basically this is a question to you, Mayor, saying, are you a little bit worried that if President Trump in fact wins, given his, whether wins or very close, and so sort of that, the language about not giving, conceding to a peaceful transfer of power, are you worried basically about the maintenance of democracy as a result?
Well, another thing my mother always says, so for all of our college students, you'll find yourself remembering things your mother said that you actually didn't think you were listening to. But my mother always says, you don't worry until you have to. So I'm not worried about it, but I am prepared for it. So I just had a conversation with our police chief today to talk about our plans for election night and after, in case there is disruption, and in case there's not a peaceful transfer of power. So it's something that we are already working on, and I know that all of the public safety agencies are working on it across the country. So it is my hope again that we show up in such high numbers that there won't be any question. And then just a reminder, and this is back to what Lily James asked, encouraging people to vote down ballot. Don't just go in and vote for the president and turn around and walk out. You got to vote for all of the races, because again, going back to our race in Georgia a few years ago, the governor, the now governor, was the Secretary of State. And so Secretary of States across the country are making these decisions on purging voter rolls and voter suppression. And so it's going to be important, vote down ballot, but I'm not worried, but we're going to be prepared.
I love that. We're not going to be worried, but we are going to be prepared. And I just want to say again, Mayor, I'm so sorry to hear that you may still be experiencing any kind of physical health effects around COVID. And so I really do have, like you have your text of sister mayors who, man, I'd like to be a fly on that wall because I know that's good. But I have a text group of some prayer warriors. So we are going to be praying for your health, your wellness, your restoration, your safety in these difficult times. And also just for everyone who joined us tonight, I'm so grateful in such difficult times that you took the time to hang out with us, to think about these questions, and that so many of the young people who joined us tonight are really working so very, very hard. Thank you, Lily James, for your work, for the work of all your friends and colleagues to make sure that we have the most representative election that we can. I want to turn it back over, and thank you again, Mount Holyoke, for this, and the Lowry Institute for organizing this.
You all were absolutely amazing. I felt like you were having like a talk right in my own living room, and I don't actually drink any wine, but if I did, I would like have a glass of wine with you all. It was amazing. far beyond anything we could have expected. And so I just want to thank you. You honor our ancestors truly by showing up, speaking out, acting out sometimes, which, good trouble is what, Congressman John Lewis used to say, get in good trouble. And both of you, honestly, like I feel really emotional saying this, but you really do honor Fannie Lou Hamer and Reverend Dr. Joseph E. Lowry and Evelyn Lowry and Reverend C.T. Vivian. And it's like 2020 just took so much from us, but we still have you and we still have each other as a community. And so I just want to thank you as Black women for showing up as you did tonight. And I also want to thank the two students who are really on their campuses making a difference. A first year, Alicia Sawyer, who is one of the Joseph and Evelyn Lowry change agents. And the change agents are a dynamic group of people. I'd love to welcome Blake Osborne on for just 1 minute, who is the grandson of Dr. and Mrs. Lowry, and who is incredible. He's a strategic director at the Lowry Institute, and they're doing incredible work there. So I just want to recognize Blake. And I also want to thank Lily and MHC Votes. We will be at 100% participation at Mount Holyoke. I'm confident with these young people at the helm who really inspired me this summer. And so you can see this beautiful collection of people. Your time is so precious. So thank you, Dr. Harris Perry. Thank you, Mayor Lance Bottoms. And Blake, I think if you could maybe, talk for 1 minute about the Lowry Institute and the work that you're doing. I do want to let everyone know we do have an event tomorrow, which features Liliana Bakhtiari, who's also in Atlanta trying to galvanize voters and challenging voter suppression. And she's going to be speaking up about LGBTQ rights in honor of National Coming Out Day. And then we have a couple of events in a couple of weeks featuring Ida B. Wells, a historian, Paula Giddings, talking about Ida B. Wells, and Martha S. Jones talking about how Black women always led the struggle for voting and suffrage. So Blake, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're going to close out for the night. Thank you, all the participants. Blake.
Thank you. It is an honor. I promise I'll hold myself to a minute, but I would be remiss just to say that this is a really humbling moment to be in a 6-person window with 5 beautiful, talented, smart Black women. It's a dream come true. So thank you for that. I'm very honored. Thank you all for allowing me to be here. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk about the Institute and to talk about my grandparents' legacy. So what we're doing, focusing on now at the Institute, is we are focused on trying to live up to the example, to the steps that Dr. and Mrs. Lowry left for us. So we're focused on 3 projects right now that I'll just highlight. One is our Change Agent Tank, which we are recruiting applications for now. This is a social justice initiative in which we are inviting college students to apply to create a social justice program, sort of similar to Shark Tank. Applications are open on the Lowry Institute website now, and this is a great opportunity for students who are interested in social justice, who have a cause in their heart, a desire that they want to follow, to continue to meet their goals. The second one is Mimi's Pantry, which is affectionately named after my grandmother. To the world, she was Evelyn Lowry. To me, she was Mimi. So this is a campus food pantry that serves students in the AUC area, giving full week's worth of food to students. Right now, its operations are a little different because of COVID-19, but we're going to be regaining servicing students again soon. And the third one is something I'm very proud of. That's what Alicia is a part of, which is our Scholar Activist Project program, in which we have students from across the nation, from schools in the Atlanta area and also from schools like the University of Tennessee, who are working on a research project on 5 different areas, looking at education, community health, the impact of technology on elections, and also doing a project on the future of policing and what they view that looks like. It's their opportunity to use their voice to understand how to conduct research on a serious level and then generate a result, which they will present in the spring. Very excited about them. Very excited to see what Alicia is doing. So that's, I think I talked for longer than a minute, so I will stop, but thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Cheryl, you don't want to say anything other than good night?
Thank you to everyone and good night. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, my mayor, and thank you to you as well, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Get out and vote. Go vote.
Get out and vote.
And fill out your census.
Fill out your census. Yes, thank you, Mayor.
And win a game, Mayor. Win a game.
Oh my gosh. You know what? The New Orleans-Atlanta rivalry is like no other, and we're going to let it end on that note because I don't want any Atlanta people sending me messages. So good night.
Good night, all. Thank you.
So good to see you all. Bye-bye.